The man in the alley should have been dead by the time I found him. At least, that's what every survival instinct in my body was screaming as the rain soaked through my Waitress uniform and turned the narrow Manhattan side street into a river of reflected neon. My shift at Russo's diner had ended 20 minutes earlier. 20 minutes. That was all that separated an ordinary Thursday night from the moment my entire life changed. The storm had rolled in fast, the kind that swallowed the city whole. Wind rattled metal signs overhead. Rain hammered against dumpsters and fire escapes. Most people had already disappeared indoors. I should have done the same. Instead, I heard something. Not a cry for help. Not even a voice. Just a faint scrape against brick. I stopped beneath the flickering glow of a security light and looked toward the far end of the alley. At first, I thought it was a pile of garbage bags. Then it moved. My heart nearly stopped. A man was sitting against the wall, one arm wrapped tightly around his side. Water streamed down his black suit. His head was lowered. For a second, neither of us moved. Then his eyes lifted toward me. Ice blue. Sharp even through obvious exhaustion. The kind of eyes that looked like they belonged to someone who never asked for help. "Keep walking," he said. His voice was rough. Controlled. Dangerous. I should have listened. Every true crime documentary I'd ever watched told me to listen. But something about the way he was struggling to stay conscious made it impossible. "You need an ambulance," I said. "No," his answer came instantly. "You need a hospital." "No hospital." I stared at him. Rain poured between us like a curtain. "You don't look like you're in a position to negotiate." For the first time, the corner of his mouth twitched. Not a smile. More like disbelief. As if nobody had spoken to him that way in a very long time. I stepped closer despite every warning bell ringing inside my head. Up close, he looked even more intimidating. Early 30s. Black slicked back hair now ruined by rain. Expensive tailored black suit. Dark tattoos winding up his neck and across the backs of his hands. Not gang tattoos. Not random designs. Precise. Deliberate. The kind that looked expensive. The kind that told stories nobody wanted to hear. He shifted slightly and winced. "Don't call the police," he said quietly. There was something different in his voice that time. Not a threat. A warning. I crossed my arms. "That's a strange thing to say to the person trying to help you." He looked away first. That surprised me more than anything. Powerful men usually wanted control of every room. Even alleyways. Yet something about him felt different. Like he was carrying the weight of 100 unfinished conversations. Thunder rolled overhead. I glanced toward the mouth of the alley. The street was empty. No pedestrians. No traffic. No witnesses. Just me and a stranger who clearly belonged in a much more expensive part of the city. "What's your name?" I asked. He hesitated. "Vincent." "Last name?" "Not important. It is if I'm dragging you somewhere safe." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Emma." My stomach tightened. "How do you know my name?" He nodded toward the name tag still pinned to my uniform. "Right. Smart. Embarrassingly smart." "Fine," I said. "Vincent. Here's what's going to happen. You're either coming with me or I'm calling 911. He studied me for several long seconds. Rainwater dripped from his jawline. Somewhere in the distance, a siren echoed through the city. Finally, he exhaled slowly. "You always this stubborn?" "Only when strangers are bleeding in alleys behind my workplace." Another almost smile. Then he tried to stand. The attempt lasted less than 2 seconds before his knees buckled. Instinct took over. I caught his arm before he hit the ground. The second I touched him, his muscles tensed. Not fear. Training. The automatic reaction of someone used to danger. Someone used to enemies. That was when headlights swept across the alley entrance. Both of us froze. A black SUV rolled slowly past the opening. Then another. Vincent's entire expression changed. Every trace of exhaustion vanished behind sudden alertness. He grabbed my wrist. Not hard. Just enough to make sure I understood. His voice dropped to a whisper. Emma. For the first time all night, he sounded genuinely concerned. If those vehicles stop, you need to run. I looked toward the alley entrance just as the first SUV slowed. My pulse hammered so hard I could hear it over the rain. The dark vehicle lingered for a second that felt like an hour before continuing down the street. The second SUV followed. Then both disappeared around the corner. Vincent did not let go of my wrist immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the empty alley. Watching. Calculating. Waiting. Only after another 10 seconds passed did his grip loosen. Friends of yours? I asked. No. The answer came too quickly. That was not reassuring. He almost looked amused despite the exhaustion pulling at his features. It was not supposed to be. Thunder cracked above the city. I glanced at his soaked suit and shook my head. Congratulations. You officially owe me the strangest night of my life. Go home, Emma. Not happening. You do not understand what is happening. You are right, I said. Because you refuse to explain anything. Another wave of rain swept through the alley. Vincent swayed slightly. The stubborn expression on his face was the only thing keeping him upright. That was when I made the decision that any sensible person would have called a terrible idea. 40 minutes later, Vincent sat at the small kitchen table inside my apartment. Water dripped from his black coat onto the floor. The apartment looked even smaller with him inside it. I lived in a third-floor walk-up in Queens. 1 bedroom. Tiny kitchen. Old radiator. Mismatched furniture from thrift stores and yard sales. Nothing about it belonged in the same universe as a man who looked like he stepped out of a luxury magazine. I handed him a clean towel. Do not get used to this. He accepted it without argument. I was not planning to. Good. You always talk this much? Only when armed strangers may be following someone into my apartment. That earned a real smile. Brief. Gone almost immediately. I disappeared into my bedroom and returned with an old sweatshirt that had belonged to my brother years ago. I tossed it onto the table. Vincent looked at it. Then at me. Then back at the sweatshirt. You want me to wear that? Unless you want to sit there looking like a drowned billionaire. What makes you think I am a billionaire? I pointed toward his watch. That thing probably costs more than my car. For the first time, he looked down at the watch as if he had forgotten it existed. A strange shadow crossed his face. Not guilt. Not pride. Something closer to regret. An hour later, the storm continued outside while Vincent sat quietly on my couch wearing a gray sweatshirt that barely fit his broad shoulders. The expensive suit jacket hung drying over a chair. The contrast would have been funny if the entire situation were not completely insane. I sat across from him with a mug of coffee. So let me get this straight. You do not want a hospital. You do not want the police. You do not want me asking questions. Correct. And somehow I am supposed to trust that. No. The answer surprised me. No. You should not trust me. Silence settled between us. The radiator rattled. Rain tapped against the windows. Somewhere downstairs, a neighbor's television played through thin walls. Vincent stared into his coffee. For the first time since I found him, he looked tired instead of dangerous. Human instead of intimidating. Then why did you let me help you? I asked quietly. His gaze lifted. Those cold blue eyes met mine across the room. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. Because when I told you to walk away, you were the only person who did not. Before I could respond, headlights flashed across my living room window. Vincent was on his feet instantly. Every trace of exhaustion vanished. He moved to the side of the window without making a sound. Watching the street below. Watching something I could not see. A black SUV had just parked across from my building. Neither of us moved as the black SUV remained parked across the street. Rain still streaked down the window, blurring the view, but Vincent stood perfectly still beside the wall, watching. Waiting. Listening. I had never seen anyone become so focused so quickly. 1 second he looked exhausted. The next, every part of him seemed alert. Do you know them? I whispered. Maybe. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have. He continued staring through a narrow gap in the curtains. Minutes passed. The SUV never moved. Finally, a man stepped out. Dark coat. Umbrella. He glanced at my building, spoke briefly into a phone, then climbed back into the vehicle. 10 seconds later, the SUV pulled away. I released a breath I did not realize I had been holding. Vincent did not relax. If anything, he looked more concerned. What? I asked. They were not looking for me. A chill ran through me. Then who were they looking for? His eyes met mine. He did not need to answer. Sleep was impossible after that. Vincent insisted on taking the couch. I insisted on locking every window and checking the front door twice. By the time the sun rose over Queens, I felt like I had slept maybe 20 minutes. The city outside looked normal again. Commuters filled the sidewalks. Delivery trucks rumbled through intersections. The storm had vanished as if it had never happened. Inside my apartment, nothing felt normal. I found Vincent standing in the kitchen wearing my oversized sweatshirt and staring at a framed photograph of my family. Coffee? I asked. Please. That surprised me. Powerful strangers usually ordered things. Vincent asked. I handed him a mug. He studied the photograph again. Your parents? My mother and my brother. Where are they now? Boston. He nodded respectfully and returned the frame exactly where he found it. Small thing. But I noticed. By 8 o'clock, I had to leave for work. Missing a shift was not an option. Rent did not care about mysterious strangers hiding in apartments. You are staying here, I told him. I do not take orders. You are in my apartment. Fair point. I pointed toward the couch. Food is in the refrigerator. Television is there. Do not touch anything else. You trust me with your apartment? Not even a little. Another brief smile. By lunchtime, I almost convinced myself the entire situation had been a stress-induced hallucination. Then 2 men in expensive suits walked into the diner. My stomach dropped instantly. They were not customers. Everything about them felt wrong. Too polished. Too observant. They ordered coffee but barely touched it. Instead, they quietly spoke with the manager. 5 minutes later, my manager approached me. Emma, those gentlemen have a question. Every nerve in my body tightened. One of the men stood as I approached. Mid-40s. Perfect haircut. Expensive watch. Calm eyes. Miss Carter, he said politely. We are looking for someone. He slid a photograph across the table. My pulse nearly stopped. Vincent stared back at me from the picture. Black suit. Cold blue eyes. Powerful. Dangerous. Very different from the man drinking coffee in my apartment. I forced myself to keep breathing. Never seen him. The man studied my face. You are sure? Should I know who he is? For the first time, something flickered behind his expression. Curiosity. No, he said. Perhaps not. The second man placed a business card on the table. If you do happen to see him, call immediately. They left moments later. I did not touch the card until they were gone. When I finally looked down, my blood turned cold. Printed beneath the phone number were 3 words. Romano Security Group. The rest of my shift passed in a blur. The second I finished work, I practically ran home. My apartment door opened before I could reach for my keys. Vincent stood there waiting. One look at my face and his expression changed. What happened? I held up the business card. For the first time since meeting him, genuine shock crossed his face. Where did you get that? At work. Silence. Heavy. Dangerous. Then Vincent took a slow breath and looked directly at me. Emma, he said quietly. You need to know who I am before this gets any worse. The room suddenly felt smaller. I stared at Vincent while rainwater from my umbrella dripped onto the hardwood floor. Who are you? I asked. He looked toward the window before answering, as if making one final calculation. Then he reached for the remote and turned on the television mounted above my bookshelf. A local news channel filled the room. The anchor was discussing a charity fundraiser, a real estate development project, and a business leader whose foundation had donated millions to community programs throughout New York. The image on the screen made my breath catch. Vincent. Wearing the same tailored black suit. Standing beside politicians, executives, and reporters. The caption beneath him read, Vincent Romano. I looked from the television to the man standing in my apartment. That is you. Yes. You own Romano Security Group? Among other companies. My stomach tightened. Those men were looking for you. Most likely. I folded my arms. You told me nothing. I told you enough to keep you safe. Safe? I laughed once, unable to stop myself. Vincent, 2 strangers came into my workplace asking questions about a man living on my couch. I do not think we passed the safe stage. To his credit, he did not argue. He simply stood there and accepted the criticism. That somehow made it harder to stay angry. Why were you in that alley? I asked. His expression hardened slightly. Someone I trusted made a decision that forced me off the grid for a few days. That sounds like a very careful way of avoiding the real answer. It is. Silence settled between us. The radiator clicked softly. Traffic moved below the apartment window. Outside, the city continued as if my entire world had not just tilted sideways. Are you some kind of criminal? I finally asked. Vincent held my gaze. I have made decisions in my life that I am not proud of. Not a yes. Not a no. Somehow that answer felt more honest. I sat down at the kitchen table and rubbed my temples. You should have told me from the beginning. Would you have helped me? The question stopped me cold. I opened my mouth. Then closed it again. Because the truth was uncomfortable. If I had known who he was in that alley, I probably would have walked away. Vincent seemed to read the answer in my expression. That is what I thought. He turned toward the window. You should call the number on that card. My head snapped up. What? Tell them you have not seen me. Why would I do that? Because if they continue asking questions, it becomes suspicious. And if I refuse? Then they may keep coming back. I hated that he was right. Even worse, I hated how naturally he analyzed every possible outcome. It was like watching someone play chess while everyone else was still learning the rules. My phone buzzed suddenly on the table. The sound made both of us look down. A text message. From my manager. Emma. 2 men came back asking about you after your shift. Call me. My heartbeat quickened. Vincent read my expression instantly. What happened? I handed him the phone. As he read the message, something dark passed behind his eyes. Not anger. Concern. Genuine concern. This is my fault, he said quietly. Yes, it is. The words came out sharper than I intended. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Vincent nodded once. Fair. That single word deflated some of my frustration. Most powerful men I had met spent their lives avoiding responsibility. Vincent accepted it immediately. I never wanted you involved in any of this, Emma. That ship sailed when I dragged a stubborn stranger out of an alley. A faint smile appeared before disappearing again. Then a serious look settled across his face. There is something else you need to know. Every instinct told me I was not going to like whatever came next. Vincent walked to the window and carefully pulled the curtain aside. Across the street, parked beneath a streetlight, sat another black SUV. This time it was not leaving. And standing beside it was a man watching my building through binoculars. My stomach dropped the moment I saw the man across the street. He was not hiding. He was standing beneath a streetlight in plain sight, watching my building like he had all the time in the world. How long has he been there? I asked. Vincent studied the scene for several seconds. Long enough. That is becoming your favorite non-answer. He lowered the curtain. Pack a bag. I stared at him. Excuse me? You cannot stay here tonight. This is my home. And someone is conducting surveillance on it. Surveillance? I repeated. Vincent, normal people do not use words like surveillance. Normal people are not being watched. The frustration that had been building inside me for 2 days finally surfaced. Stop deciding things for me. His expression tightened. Emma. No. You do not get to walk into my life, bring danger to my apartment, and then start giving orders. Silence filled the room. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Vincent looked away first. For a moment, I thought he would argue. Instead, he took a slow breath. I am trying to keep you safe. And I am trying to keep my life. The words landed harder than I intended. His jaw flexed slightly. Not anger. Something closer to disappointment. You think I do not understand that? He asked quietly. I think you do not understand what it feels like to lose control of everything overnight. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then Vincent nodded once. Fair enough. The calm response somehow made me feel worse. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. Where are you going? A walk. That is a terrible idea. I was not asking permission. Outside, the evening air felt colder than it should have. Queens moved around me in its usual rhythm. Cars passed. People carried groceries. A couple argued outside a convenience store. Everything looked normal. Yet I could not shake the feeling that my life no longer belonged to me. I ended up at a small park 3 blocks away. Rainwater still glistened on the benches from the previous storm. I sat alone beneath a tree and stared at the city skyline in the distance. My phone buzzed. One message. Unknown number. You should not be alone right now. I froze. Another message arrived immediately. Look to your left. My heart slammed against my ribs. I turned. Across the street, parked beside a coffee shop, sat a black sedan. The windows were tinted. Before I could react, my phone rang. The same unknown number. I answered. What? You left without telling me. Vincent's voice carried through the speaker. Relief mixed instantly with irritation. Are you following me? Yes. That is insane. Possibly. Vincent. You walked away angry while someone is watching your apartment. I rubbed my forehead. You cannot solve every problem by controlling it. Silence greeted me for several seconds. Then his voice returned, lower this time. I know. The honesty caught me off guard. Do you? I asked. Because from where I am standing, it looks like you trust your power more than you trust people. Another pause. Longer this time. Traffic moved between us. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked. Finally, Vincent spoke. That used to be true. Used to be. The words stayed with me. For the first time since meeting him, I heard something beneath the confidence. Regret. Real regret. When I returned to the apartment an hour later, Vincent was sitting alone at the kitchen table. A folder rested beside him. He pushed it toward me. What is this? Everything I should have told you earlier. I opened it cautiously. Newspaper articles. Business reports. Charity events. Public records. Years of Vincent's life arranged in careful order. Why are you giving me this? I asked. His blue eyes met mine. Because trust works both ways. For the first time since our argument began, I saw genuine vulnerability beneath the armor he wore so well. Then my phone buzzed again. A new message appeared from another unknown number. This one contained only a photograph. My apartment building. Taken less than 5 minutes ago. The photograph felt like ice in my hands. My apartment building. My front entrance. The timestamp showed it had been taken only minutes earlier. I looked up at Vincent. His expression changed the second he saw my face. What is it? He asked. I handed him the phone. The calm disappeared from his eyes almost instantly. He read the message twice before placing the phone carefully on the table. Too carefully. That worried me more than panic would have. Who sent it? I asked. I do not know. You always know. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Vincent looked away. Not this time. Silence settled over the room. I hated how afraid I suddenly felt. Not because of the photograph. Because of his uncertainty. Until now, Vincent had always seemed 3 steps ahead of everyone else. Seeing him without answers made the danger feel real. He picked up his phone and stepped toward the window. A brief conversation followed. Low voice. Short sentences. When he hung up, he looked older somehow. More tired. Pack a bag. I laughed bitterly. There it is again. Emma. No. I am serious. Every solution you have involves moving me somewhere, hiding me somewhere, controlling where I go and who I see. Because someone is using you to reach me. And whose fault is that? The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted them. Vincent froze. The room became painfully quiet. Outside, a siren echoed somewhere in the distance. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, he nodded once. Mine. That should have made me feel better. Instead, it made me feel worse. Because he was not arguing. He was accepting responsibility. Again. I never asked for any of this, I said quietly. I know. I had a normal life 3 days ago. I know. I had a job. An apartment. Plans. His jaw tightened. I know, Emma. The sadness in his voice caught me off guard. Not anger. Not frustration. Sadness. Real sadness. For the first time, I realized he was disappointed in himself too. He sat down across from me. The distance between us felt larger than the table separating us. The person behind this was never supposed to find you, he said. Someone inside my organization leaked information. The person who betrayed you. He nodded. Someone I trusted for years. I stared at him. And now they know about me. Yes. The honesty hurt. More than a lie would have. I stood and walked toward the window. The city lights blurred through the glass. For several moments, I said nothing. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in the back of my mind since the alley. How many people have gotten hurt because of your world? Vincent did not answer immediately. That was answer enough. More than I wanted, he finally said. More than I can change. I closed my eyes. There it was. The wall between us. Not fear. Not money. Not power. Values. I believed people should solve problems without fear. Vincent came from a world where fear seemed built into every foundation. Suddenly, all the trust we had been building felt fragile. Maybe this was a mistake, I whispered. His face went still. Helping you. The words hung between us like broken glass. Vincent looked down at the table. For the first time since meeting him, he seemed genuinely wounded. Not physically. Emotionally. If that is how you feel, he said quietly, I will leave tonight. My heart twisted unexpectedly. Because I did not want him to leave. I wanted my old life back. But somehow those were no longer the same thing. Before either of us could speak again, a sharp knock echoed through the apartment. Once. Twice. 3 times. Both of us froze. Vincent rose slowly from his chair. Another knock followed. Then a familiar voice came through the door. Emma? It is Mrs. Delgado from downstairs. There are 2 men asking questions about you in the lobby right now. Every muscle in my body locked. Mrs. Delgado's voice trembled from the hallway. Emma? Are you there? Vincent was already moving. Not toward the door. Toward the back of the apartment. Thinking. Calculating. The same way he always did when pressure closed in. I hated how familiar that had become. Do not answer, he said quietly. She is my neighbor. And she does not need to be involved. Another knock echoed through the apartment. Emma, honey, I told them I did not know anything. My stomach dropped. Vincent closed his eyes for a brief second. That means they have already been talking to people in the building. The realization hit me hard. My neighbors knew me. Mrs. Delgado knew when I worked. Mr. Harris downstairs knew which bus I took every morning. Suddenly all those normal details felt exposed. I stepped toward the door anyway. Vincent caught my wrist. Not aggressively. Just enough to stop me. Listen to me. His voice was calm. Too calm. If someone is gathering information, then your routine is already compromised. You keep talking like I am some operation. Because right now someone is treating you like one. I looked at him and saw something I had missed before. Fear. Not for himself. For me. The realization unsettled me more than the knocks. The hallway finally went quiet. Mrs. Delgado's footsteps faded. Vincent released my wrist immediately. I am sorry, he said. I blinked. For what? For all of it. The apartment fell silent again. I stared at him, searching for the arrogance I expected from someone with his power. It was not there. Just exhaustion. Regret. And something that looked dangerously close to guilt. My phone buzzed. Then buzzed again. And again. 3 messages within seconds. Unknown number. The first read, "We only want to talk." The second contained a photograph of me leaving the diner that morning. The third simply said, "Ask Vincent about Anthony." I felt the blood drain from my face. Vincent saw it immediately. "What is it?" I handed him the phone. The moment he read the final message, his expression changed. Not panic. Something worse. Recognition. "Who is Anthony?" I asked. Vincent remained silent. Vincent. Still nothing. The hurt I had been carrying for hours suddenly flared into anger. "Who is Anthony?" He finally looked at me. "Someone I trusted." "The traitor?" He nodded once. "Then why did they send his name?" Vincent walked to the window and stared into the darkness outside. "Because they want you to believe this is my fault." I laughed bitterly. "Is it not?" The words landed between us like a slammed door. For several seconds he did not respond. Then he gave the answer I least expected. "Part of it is." That honesty should have helped. Instead, it made everything harder. Because I wanted a villain. I wanted someone to blame. Vincent refused to make it that simple. Another message arrived. This time there was no photograph. Only a location pinned near the East River and a single sentence beneath it. "Come alone if you want answers." Vincent read it over my shoulder. His jaw tightened. "You are not going." I was not planning to. "Good. Stop assuming I need your permission." The frustration returned instantly. We were exhausted. Scared. Hurt. And every conversation felt like a collision. Vincent looked away. "Fair." The word sounded heavier this time. Then his phone rang. He answered immediately. The conversation lasted less than 30 seconds. When he hung up, all color had drained from his face. "What happened?" I asked. Vincent stared at the floor for a moment before speaking. "Anthony was found this morning." "Alive?" He nodded. "Then that is good news." Vincent's expression said otherwise. "No," he said quietly. "It means the person behind this wanted him found." A chill crawled down my spine. "Why?" His blue eyes met mine. "Because now the game has changed." The game had changed, but nobody seemed willing to explain the rules. Vincent spent the next hour on calls that grew shorter and quieter with each conversation. I sat across from him at the kitchen table, pretending to read the folder he had given me while my mind raced in circles. Anthony. The mysterious messages. The photographs. The strangers asking questions. None of it felt real anymore. Shortly after midnight, Vincent finally ended his last call and placed his phone face down on the table. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument we had ever had. "Tell me the truth," I said. His eyes lifted immediately. "I have been." "Not all of it." He looked away. That alone gave me my answer. "What are you still hiding?" For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. "Anthony was not only my employee." "Then what was he?" "He was my closest friend." The confession caught me off guard. For the first time since meeting him, Vincent looked less like a powerful man and more like someone carrying years of disappointment. "How long?" I asked. "Almost 15 years. I stared at him. "And you think he betrayed you?" "I know he leaked information." "Do you know why?" He shook his head. "That is what worries me." I looked down at the photographs scattered across the table. "You trusted him." "Yes." "And he still turned against you." Vincent's expression darkened slightly. "That is the part one cannot understand." Something about the way he said it made me realize this was bigger than business. Bigger than money. Anthony had not just damaged his organization. He had broken something personal. The realization softened some of the anger I had been carrying. Not all of it. But enough. My phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. This time there was no threat. No photograph. Only a single sentence. Ask him what happened 3 years ago. Vincent saw my face immediately. What now? I handed him the phone. The moment he read the message, all emotion disappeared from his expression. That scared me more than any reaction could have. Vincent. He remained silent. What happened 3 years ago? He stood and walked toward the window. Nothing that concerns you. I laughed in disbelief. That answer stopped working days ago. He remained facing the glass. Manhattan's distant lights reflected faintly in the darkness outside. 3 years ago, he finally said, a decision I made cost someone everything. The room went still. Anthony? No. Then who? Vincent closed his eyes briefly. His sister. I felt a knot form in my stomach. What happened? I trusted the wrong people. She paid the price. His voice remained steady, but I could hear the regret beneath it. Deep. Permanent. And Anthony blamed you. Vincent nodded once. Suddenly pieces began falling into place. Not all of them. But enough. So this is not about power, I said quietly. It is about revenge. Possibly. I sat back in my chair. The anger I had directed at Vincent became harder to hold on to. Not because he was innocent. Because he already carried the consequences. Every mistake. Every regret. Every loss. They were all still there. Then another realization hit me. Wait. Vincent turned. If this is personal, then I was never the target. His expression changed immediately. Emma. I was leverage. Silence. That is why they kept contacting me. That is why they wanted me scared. Vincent looked away. He could not deny it. The truth landed harder than I expected. All this time I had believed danger found me by accident. Now I understood. Someone had chosen me specifically because of what I meant to Vincent. Before either of us could speak again, a new message appeared on his phone. He read it once. Then a second time. Every trace of color disappeared from his face. What is it? I asked. Vincent looked directly at me. For the first time since I found him in that alley, he sounded completely defeated. Anthony wants to meet tomorrow morning, he said quietly. And he specifically asked for you to be there. The next morning arrived gray and cold. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, another question appeared. Why me? Why now? Why had a stranger from an alley somehow become the center of my life in less than a week? Vincent drove us himself. No convoy. No security detail. Just a black sedan moving through the quiet streets of Manhattan before sunrise. Neither of us spoke much. The tension from the night before still lingered between us. Not anger anymore. Something deeper. Understanding. We finally arrived at a rooftop garden above an office building overlooking the East River. The city stretched around us in every direction. Anthony was already there. He looked nothing like the monster I had imagined. He looked tired. Older than his years. Like someone carrying grief for far too long. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Anthony looked directly at me. You are Emma. Yes. He nodded slowly. I am sorry you got dragged into this. That was not the opening I expected. Vincent remained silent beside me. Anthony turned toward him. You finally told her the truth? Vincent gave a small nod. Anthony laughed softly. That must have been difficult. Harder than you think. The two men stared at each other. 15 years of friendship. 3 years of resentment. A lifetime of things left unsaid. Finally, Anthony sighed. You still do not understand why I did it. Vincent's voice remained calm. Then tell me. Anthony looked toward the skyline. Because nobody ever made you stop. Silence followed. Everyone around you was afraid of you. They followed you. Protected you. Excused you. But nobody ever made you face what your decisions did to other people. Vincent lowered his eyes. He did not argue. He did not defend himself. Anthony continued. Then she appeared. He pointed toward me. A waitress with a tiny apartment who talked to you like you were a normal human being. I blinked. I am standing right here. For the first time, Anthony smiled. Exactly. Even Vincent almost smiled. The tension eased slightly. Then Anthony reached into his jacket and handed Vincent a folder. Everything is in there. Vincent opened it carefully. Documents. Financial records. Communications. Proof that someone else inside the organization had manipulated events from the beginning, using Anthony's anger as cover. Anthony shook his head. I was angry. I was foolish. But I was not the person targeting Emma. Vincent looked through the pages. The weight on his face slowly changed. Not relief. Clarity. The missing pieces finally fit together. Why give this to me now? Vincent asked. Anthony looked toward the river. Because 3 years ago I lost faith in you. Then he glanced at me. But she did not. My chest tightened. Anthony laughed quietly. The funny part is that she had every reason to walk away. Vincent looked at me then. Really looked at me. Not as someone he needed to protect. Not as a problem to solve. Just Emma. The woman who found him on the worst night of his life and refused to leave him behind. Anthony eventually left. No dramatic farewell. No threats. No revenge. Just closure. Sometimes the biggest battles end with a conversation people should have had years earlier. An hour later, Vincent and I stood alone at the edge of the rooftop. The city shimmered beneath the morning sun. For the first time since the alley, everything felt quiet. You are free now, Vincent said. I looked at him. Free? The people responsible are exposed. The surveillance is over. Nobody will bother you again. His voice remained steady, but I could hear something hidden beneath it. Loss. He was letting me go. Vincent. He stared toward the skyline. You saved my life, Emma. I do not intend to repay that by controlling yours. The words settled between us. Honest. Vulnerable. Real. I smiled softly. Good. He looked confused. Good. Because if you tried, I would probably throw coffee at you. A surprised laugh escaped him. The first genuine laugh I had ever heard from him. Then silence returned. Comfortable this time. You know, I said quietly, when I found you in that alley, I thought I was helping a stranger. Vincent's blue eyes met mine. And now? I looked across the city before answering. Now I think we both needed saving. For a moment neither of us spoke. The wind moved gently across the rooftop. Far below, New York continued its endless motion. Vincent finally smiled. Small. Real. Unguarded. And in that moment I realized something important. I had saved him from one terrible night. But somewhere along the way, he had saved me from a life too small for the courage I never knew I had. Sometimes the people who change us arrive like storms. Unexpected. Complicated. Impossible to ignore. And sometimes the greatest rescue has nothing to do with being saved. It has everything to do with finally being seen.